What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again. And this time we got Henry of the Brothers of Thrash. We got Hammerhead here. Thank you so much for being here today, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we have the newest album is Grand Currents, which came out just a couple weeks ago. Do you just want to talk about like how the making of this album was, like how the songwriting was, the recording, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, we it feels kind of old at this point, but the writing started, I want to say September of 2019 would be like the earliest riffs we had, and then we were still playing live at that point. So we sort of workshopped some of our songs live, and then took Foundation into the studio, released that as a single, wrote the rest of the songs, recorded them in March, so a year ago or more than a year ago. Originally we released it in July, but we're kind of re-releasing it now with management and new merch, new vinyl, new cover art, stuff like that. So yeah, we're doing the sort of the PR thing for re-release right now.
That's awesome. And like being that you wrote this, in 2019 and you are doing re-releases and stuff is what we're hearing like if we're just discovering Grand Currents now, like did these songs maybe change a lot over a span of time or is what we're hearing how these songs were originally recorded?
Uh, they if I don't know if we released any of the live videos from like late 2019, early 2020. But they the songs have like definitely shifted. They sort of stopped changing and molding like beginning of March, right before we went to the studio, and then that was kind of what they were at that point. And yeah, that I mean they haven't changed at all from like the original release to the this year release. They are the same songs, same recordings.
hmm And of course, like when I hear like Hammerhead, I'm thinking of great classic thrash. I mean, it's relentless. It's pedal to the metal, no pulls punched. One of the first artists I think of is usually maybe like Sacred Reich or something that really has that extra edge to it. Is and I know that some artists, it's kind of a cliche question, but was there like a pinnacle thrash band or a certain thrash era that influenced Hammerhead, or were you just taking elements from Metallica and Megadeth to maybe more modern days with bands like Power Trip or Creator or something like that?
All of those bands, all the ones you just mentioned. I used to be a huge Sacred Reich fan, still am, but like that, I used to that they're awesome. I would say the main like peak thrash influences we took into the EP in 2018 were like Demolition Hammer, like Death Thrash, stuff like that.
Sepultura.
Maybe Sepultura for sure. Yeah. Um, Power Trip is a huge one. I love Power Trip. Havoc at the time of that album, we opened for them, and then that influenced us a ton on that album or that EP. The new album, Grand Currents, I'd say is like we took our thrash roots and kind of meshed it with like the more progressive side of like modern metal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at right now.
hmm Yeah, and to you, what makes thrash metal? Because like, you compare Metallica to Slayer, and you compare like Slayer to Sepultura, and you compare that to like Sacred Reich or Power Trip or Havoc. It just seems like there's always been like an evolution of thrash. And one thing that I think is great about Hammerhead is that it's just not like another thrash clone. You know what I mean? It's not like I think you have your own identity in a way. But to you, like, what makes something thrash? Like, does it have to have a certain element that applies to all thrash bands?
Uh, me, I could spend a lot of time like trying to distill down what it is. I would say probably I know this is more than just thrash because a lot of music is like this is more than just thrash music, but riff driven music is like it all those bands are very riff driven. Like it's the song starts with the riff and it still does for us. Like that's never gonna change. The song is always the riff. And whether you build the riff rhythmically or melodically or like what we're doing now is kind of more rhythmic stuff. It always starts with the riff. That's the base idea for the song. So I'd say that's kind of what we took away from thrash. That's what our thing is.
Yeah, and because I've heard so many artists, not even just in thrash metal, but like say, oh, it always starts off with a riff. It always starts off with a riff, but like it almost seems like there's multiple angles you could approach a riff from, right? It's not like it's just rhythm driven or
Yeah,
melodic
yeah.
driven.
So
Like,
like like a band like uh a band like Meshuggah always starts with a riff too, but like the riff is based off of Thomas's kick pattern, or like a rhythmic pattern that's mostly chugging on an open string. Like it's still a riff, but it's built out of a rhythm.
Yeah. And has there ever been a time being a vocalist as well? Do lyrics ever influence the sound of the music as well? Like, do you ever have like a lyrical idea that could influence the music, or is it always just music first before any lyrics are incorporated?
We're kind of starting to switch it, but it's always been music first. So like for the new album, like the album we're writing right now, I'd say like the lyrics. Uh, I have lyric ideas right now that are influencing the way we write a little bit, but it hasn't been like that for Grand Currents or Essence of Iron.
Okay. But
It's always been first.
yeah, you don't want to have like the best lyrics ever, but then they're always like one syllable over every arrangement you have, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're trying to get away from that, but yeah, it always ends up like that.
Yeah. Being that, the band consists of brothers, do you find it easier to write music, whether it's riffs or lyrics or anything, when, you're all in the company of each other and, you're all playing together? Or is it easier to come up with ideas when maybe you're like more alone and there's nothing in between you and your instrument?
Actually, I feel like we kind of differ a little bit on, like, as a band, we kind of differ from other bands in our writing style. We very rarely, I can point to like one or two riffs ever that we've written that we've kept for an album that we don't write together. We write everything during the jam sessions we have, because we don't have to. We live in the same house, so we don't have to like schedule anything. So they come naturally in a jam. So it, like, I find it kind of impossible to write riffs on my own for Hammerhead, because it's, you can never tell if it's good until Eli plays with me over it, or he, like, usually it's based off of some rhythm he's doing. So that's where they come from.
That's really cool to hear. It's also very convenient, I'd imagine. You don't have to scramble to find a
Yeah,
practice space. Like, I think there's some
yeah, yeah,
bands seething in envy right now. But it's cool that you all like learn from each other and that you all kind of like rely on each other in a way to write the music, because one, it prevents ego. You all write together, you always,
yeah,
and it's all very organic, and it makes the process very organic, right? Because like it just seems like
yeah.
it's a spur of the moment jam session thing. It's not like one person wrote it on a computer and then another person has to learn it. It just seems like you all learn the songs together as you write them.
Yeah, there's I have no problem with bands who do that. I love bands who do that, who have gone into their writing process and stuff like that. We there's never been any like, now you got to learn this thing that I wrote for any, like, it's always, the idea comes from the jam, and then usually um, we get one riff and we build, like, in a jam, if we build off of that riff or play it for like the next hour and then see where it goes. And usually if we're playing like a riff for that long, it's good enough to keep in our minds. So that's kind of where the song comes from after that.
Yeah, there needs to be like a Brothers of Heavy Metal tour, like maybe like have a Cavalera Conspiracy play with Gojira, play with Alien
Yeah,
Weaponry, and you guys. That would be like a really interesting tour.
it is a theme, isn't it? Like the guitarist drummer brother combination.
Yeah,
For us bass too, but yeah.
yeah. Which it's something to be envious of, because for most metalheads, I don't know, it's definitely not the case for you, but there's usually, for most metalheads, they're usually like the only metalhead in their whole family. But
Yeah, yeah. Me and Eli and Abe are the only metalheads that we know. Outside of the people who work like with the band, that's we don't know anybody else really.
so all three of you drove the parents crazy, jamming out loud in the
Yeah,
garage and everything like that.
exactly. Yeah.
Yep. And you know, obviously, thrash metal. You have all these different inspirations, but can you see yourself maybe stepping into more territory in the future with your style, like, and bring in some different elements for the future of Hammerhead? Is there like any experimentation that you like to do?
Oh yeah. The next album is gonna. I should probably start saying this now, because we're gonna have to start saying it anyway. The next album is gonna sound way different. It's still gonna be rooted in the riff and thrash and all that, but it's gonna sound way different. Um, the stuff we've been writing is already kind of in a different vein, so it's still gonna be heavy. It's actually gonna be heavier, but probably just not as like through the last two albums or releases, we've had a lot of like the death thrash sort of um, influences, like a lot of double bass, a lot of tremolo picking. It's gonna be more chunk and groove instead of like the death metal style of heavy.
Okay, yeah, because before I compared Hammerhead a lot to like Beneath the Remains era Sepultura. Like that's what I really
Yeah,
thought of. Like I mean, kicking right into that, I immediately thought of Stronger Than Hate and all of
yeah,
those
yeah,
badass tracks. And but yeah, so having more groove, like I'd imagine there's like some Pantera influences as well, right? Or like some, I'm,
yeah, yeah. A lot of like well, I keep bringing up Meshuggah, but like the polyrhythms of Meshuggah, or like the groove of Pantera, stuff like that. The chunk of like Mastodon and Bill Kelleher's tone, stuff like that. That's the newer stuff we're going in.
gent thrash. That'll be the new genre.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like syncopated stuff.
Yeah. And was this something that you just always wanted to do? Was this something that you've always planned to do, or did it kind of just happen that way as you were all writing more together?
Oh, it just happens. We don't do anything contrived. It just like whatever feels best. We just play.
Okay. And here comes the most difficult question, though. How do you know when the song is done?
Yeah. When we think the song is done, we listen to it for like 2 weeks, and then we realize it's probably not done. So kind of the song is done when you decide to leave it alone. That old quote, that's not nothing's really done.
Yeah,
You just kind of start, you leave it alone.
yeah. That's the default answer for every time I ask it. It's like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
always keep bringing
I got nothing else because it, the songs on Grand Currents, I could go back and make a million changes that I think would make it better. But like, I mean, that's hindsight.
Yeah, fair enough, right? Yeah, and not to mention you develop as an artist so much. If you're not looking back at your stuff thinking I would do that differently, then that just means you haven't evolved.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah. And what I think is so great about, Hammerhead's music is like going back to Grand Currents, I feel like even though the music is relentless and, pedal to the metal, I do get many different like vibes from each song. Like I feel like each song has its own like for lack of better words, like emotion behind it. Like, going from Gift of Fire to a track like Foundation to a track like Electric Sense. I mean, like, is it fair to say that these are like representative of what you and your brothers were kind of like feeling at that time? Does feeling or emotion influence how you write in a way?
Yeah, for sure. It's the I would say that yeah, I kind of each song is so like densely packed and long on Grand Currents that I totally get what you're saying there. Like the each track has a specific intention behind it. That's kind of like what we try to do with our songs.
Yeah. Is that why you kind of have like a fair share of like interlude tracks like in between with like hypercurrents or intuition, like those tracks kind of like to build up to it a little bit more and maybe give the listener a chance to sort of catch their breath after 9 minutes of relentlessness?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think we're gonna do more of that on the next album too, because it gives the album flow. And I know a lot of people, especially myself and Eli, we're full album guys. Like we like to listen to the full thing as it was intended to be. So people who do that, they like you can't if it's always heavy, then it's not heavy. So you gotta pepper in some like interludes and stuff like that.
Build up elements. I think it makes the album more cinematic. It almost kind of like has a narrative and like and you're right. Like when I listen to Grand Currents, it's one of those albums where I just want to sit down and listen to it. It's not like something I just put on shuffle mode just to listen to like on the commute to
Yeah,
work. You know what I mean?
that's kind of what those are the type of albums we like to listen to too, from the bands that we love. So that's kind of us trying to emulate that, like the cinematic, sit down and listen to it like a movie almost kind of thing.
Yeah. Do movies also influence it? Do you get inspired by certain films and stuff or other artistic mediums to influence your music?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I wouldn't consider myself like a movie buff, but they definitely influence it for sure,
Yeah.
especially the lyric.
Yeah. Any particular movies that maybe like movie Easter eggs incorporated on the albums?
There will be next album. I was not that far along with the lyrics, for this album. Like, I'm sure a lot of movies influenced it, but I think we're gonna do maybe a couple lyrical themes around movies for this next album, because we definitely a couple of them have like really inspired some riffs on the album. So
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think there will be on the next one.
There's a great new thrash band out there on Century Media called they're pronounced Beast, but they're spelled Baest. I don't know if you heard of them,
Okay.
but
I have not. No.
they're insane, and their latest album was influenced by 1984, the book.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
like I've always said that like thrash metal is like the angry man's thinking music in a way, because there's just all these interesting concepts. Sepultura wrote a whole album on A Clockwork Orange, and so
yeah, yeah,
so
for
it's
sure. I got to check them out. But I every thrash band ever has gotten into that like impending doom territory of like 1984
yeah.
for sure.
And in the wake of this pandemic, I'm thinking like heavy metal is like when they make movies based on this time, that's going to be like the soundtrack to describe these times that
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
living in right now.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
And got a couple more questions for you, but when it comes to
Yeah.
playing live, is there a similar energy that you channel into your live presence as you do when you and your brothers are playing together? Or do you like, is there a similar aspect behind it, or do you consider playing live and rehearsing or songwriting to be two completely separate arts?
Not completely separate. Like ideally, I would love for the electric moments we get when we jam to like be translated onto the stage perfectly, but that's kind of impossible if you. It's not impossible, but it's really hard if you're not just jamming. So like I don't think we could just jam on stage. That'd be like we're just not that good yet. So our stage show is very tight and rehearsed and practiced, and it gets a different energy, but like it kind of feels the same as like when you come up with a good riff in a jam.
Hmm. Do you almost have to? I like asking artists this: is crowd interaction and stage presence, is that like something that you have to practice in a way, or like does that just come
Um,
naturally?
I, both. I mean, we don't. We haven't played live in a year and a half, so um, I can't wait to do it again. But yeah, that took a long time for us to get comfortable with, like, or me specifically as a front man, because you kind like in between songs, you got to do it's it's kind of you got to work on like your banter and stuff like that. It just you got to practice it, I guess.
Yeah, you get like a couple dolls or dummies set up and pretend you're interacting with them.
Yeah, yeah, just whatever works, I guess. I mean, like I kind of just the practice came during the live show. It's kind of like a stand-up comedian would work out his set in front of a live audience. It's kind of the same way. Like you win some, you lose some. Sometimes you'll bomb. Sometimes you'll do good.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for a great discussion. It's great to really like nerd out on thrash metal with somebody.
Yeah, for sure.
is there just
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
any awesome? Is there just anything else that you would like to promote for Hammerhead in terms of like when can we be expecting the new album? This will be uploaded by midnight, so if it hasn't been announced yet, don't say it here. But like, is there anything else you want to promote for new merch, the re-release of Grand Currents, and anything else?
Um, new vinyl. Like you can go pre-order the new vinyl. It's the first vinyl anything we've ever had. So I want to say there's 400 copies of it. Um, what else? We got a new music video coming out for the song Sediment off of Grand Currents in the next 2 weeks, I want to say. And then after that, it's kind of new album time. Like we'll be announcing the schedule for it, probably playing some shows in the fall, and then releasing it early 2021 or early 2022.
Yeah, can you please come to New York City when everything's back to normal?
Yes, we want to come everywhere when everything's back to normal. So our management is in New York City, so we'll definitely be going up there for some things anyway.
Yeah, well, in New York City, they're doing outdoor concerts now at the parks. Like Madball is playing with Murphy's Law at Tompkins Square Park. So bring some
Oh
thrash,
yeah,
do play some thrash metal in the middle of Times Square.
yeah. I would love to do that. That'd be super fun.
Yeah, it'll be insane.
Hopefully soon.
It'll be Mad Max. But
Yeah, yeah.
thanks a lot, man. Everybody, we are here with Hammerhead. Check out Grand Currents if you haven't already, and be sure to check out new stuff coming very soon. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.